Want to survive? You got to adapt. You got to respond to the environment, the situation. You got to think on your feet. You got to be quick. Otherwise, this is what happens. Whatever Carmine threw at me, I delivered on. Every goddamn time.
Welcome back, everybody. This is my Penguin breakdown of episode 2 titled Inside Man. To me, this episode was all about survival for Oz, him making it out alive during the truck heist, him navigating the funeral scene with the knife situation, as he just continues to prove that he's got what it takes to adapt and survive, but now he's got a dance partner in Sofia by the end of this episode. We got a lot to get into in this breakdown, spoilers ahead. We open with Sofia at Arkham as Hangman is being whispered by a woman in the background, making it feel like a scene out of Nightmare on Elm Street, as she's brought to go see her now deceased brother Al. Sofia notices that his finger is missing while he's promising to get her out of Arkham just as he's being shot by an unknown person behind him, as Sofia sees flashes of him in the trunk and him getting killed over and over and over again. As we cut to seeing that she's actually in a therapy session with her therapist Dr. Julian Rush, who calms her down and tells her that she's not in Arkham anymore and that she's safe, as she responds by telling him,
"I'm not safe. I'm home."
A few things I want to mention from this opening scene. Number one, this vision/nightmare was incredibly effective, and yet again, it gives us moments like this to humanize these bad people, these villains, and showing us how close she was to her brother and how his death is affecting her. Now, the next thing I want to point out, do Sofia and Dr. Rush have a romantic relationship? Because if you look back at this scene, the way he's calming her down and holding her down seemed very physical for a therapist to be doing and kind of crossing that boundary line. Now, we don't see any more of Dr. Rush in this episode, but I'm pretty sure that we'll be seeing him again. And lastly, I want to mention, now this is just a theory, but I'm unsure if Julian Rush is a stand-in for Jonathan Kane, aka the Scarecrow, who in the comics was also a therapist. Now, could he loosely be based on that comic book character, or is he just a new character altogether? Comment your thoughts on Dr. Rush and his relationship with Sofia, but also let me know if you think he's posing as this show's Scarecrow in the comments below. As we cut to Oz outside in the rain as he's headed back into Blackgate to revisit Sal Maroni. This time around, Sal's got his family and crew present, as you'll notice that he has his ring back on. Now, Sal is very aware of the war that Oz is waging between the families and isn't seeing getting into business with Oz as a smart business plan. Oz tells him about the new Don Luca, who we meet in this episode, as he tells him,
Falcones are still licking their wounds. They're distracted. And I got the inside track with the new Don. It can work. We can take them all down, Sal. You gotta do your part.
We meet Nadia Maroni, and who I assume is their son in this scene, as his wife tells him what type of man she believes Oz is, but ultimately he can still be controlled. Now, Saul and Oz make a deal, and that deal is that he'll claim the hit on Al, and Oz will make good on the drops that he promised and has to work with one of Sal's men who will be running point on this hit job. We see Oz gives them the full details of how they can pull off this hit job with the Falcone family. Now, it's supposed to be a simple job with Oz being the trail guy on this run. Now, for the first time in this series, we hear Johnny calling Oz
Penguin,
as Johnny forces Oz on the truck, the same one that the drops are on and the same one that's about to be robbed, making this situation more complicated. As they hit the streets, we see Maroni's men pulling up and they get the plans in motion as Oz has to make a quick move to avoid getting shot and distracts the men inside the truck, which he eventually does, as we see the Falcone's body drop and even Oz has to take some out on his own. Now, during this shootout, we see the driver isn't dead and actually shoots at Oz but misses and hits the point man on this job, and we're to assume that he's dead. Now, this causes Oz to pivot and make his way out of the truck to rejoin the forces of the Falcone and Sofia's head security to make appearances seem like he's on their side, as they have to regroup and retreat, leaving the truck there for the Maronis to claim their prize, but having lost men in the process. This to me is a perfect example of what I'm excited to see for the rest of the season, and that is Oz pivoting from one side to the other, as he continues to show us how quick he is on his feet to make sure that he survives by any means necessary. Sofia arrives to hearing the news about the hit job, as we see that Johnny's pissed and only concerned about the product and the money being taken. Now, Sofia steps in and reminds them that the money is easy to replace, but it's the embarrassment shown against their family after what was done to Al, and that is the key. That is more important, and Oz agrees with her in this moment, which to me is the start of him slowly getting Sofia on his side, as she tells them,
"Look, Sofia, we all cared for Alberto.
Well, I doubt that, Milosh. I really do. Justice is what matters, and that is what my brother, your nephew, deserves."
Now, Sofia smells a rat within their operation as Johnny pushes back and tells her that she doesn't have the right to make that call, nor does she call the shots. In this moment, you can see the wheels running in Oz's head as he's 100% gonna play on this tension between Johnny and Sofia. As we meet Luca, who is now the new Don, who reminds Johnny to stay in his place as we watch Johnny apologizes to Sofia. Now, Luca is someone that's very ambitious in the comics and he believes that he can get away and do whatever he wants, and it seems like he's gonna do the same thing in this very show. Now, Luca playing the part as he tells Sofia to stand behind and tells her that he wants her to focus on laying her brother to rest. Meanwhile, he'll be handling the family business moving forward, and he'll look into finding this rat that Sofia believes is in their family organization. Now, Oz, the opportunist, waits for Sofia outside to let her know that what happened between them in last week's episode is now water under the bridge. As we watch Oz plant the seeds for her to take over the family business, as he tells her,
Because it should be you in there, calling the shots. You should be the new boss, not Carmine's little brother.
Careful.
Yeah, careful, whatever. So I shouldn't say it. So what? Al's dead. I left him too. More than those pricks. And look, if one of them had a hand in it, well, who's to say you ain't next? They didn't care about Al. They sure as shit don't like you. They think you're crazy, but you don't need me telling you that. You can feel it.
Now, Oz also leans into the belief that there's a rat amongst them and that she's got the card to play to force the power to her side. Now, that power card is Al's new drug, as he tells her that this will keep her brother's hope and dream alive. Now, Sofia, as they say, she looks right through his BS and she isn't taking the bait, as she tells him,
Very, very convenient that all of a sudden you're on my side. Will you look at that? Right? My little helper.
All right.
You are scrambling for whatever dignity you have left, and you're hoping I will save you. Not gonna happen. I don't know you.
Well, you're right, you don't. I owe you.
I absolutely love the dynamic between these two characters. It's one of my favorite elements of the show, but the question remains, what will it take for Oz to gain Sofia's confidence and trust? Well, that will come full circle by the end of this episode. Now, we get this quick scene of Oz talking to Victor about what just happened, and you'll notice that Vic stops and looks at this missing sign. Now, I couldn't tell which one exactly caught his eye, but I think the point of this scene was to show that he's maybe got family looking for him after the floods, and we see him getting a text asking if he's okay and where he's at that he ignores later in this episode. So maybe Vic didn't lose everything back at Crown Point, but instead he used the flood as a way to start his life over and never wants to go back home. Now let's stick with Oz and Vic here for a little bit, as Oz wants to make an inside man and a rat, as we see that that rat will be Johnny, something that I mentioned in my breakdown last week. Now we hear some backstory about how Oz got involved with the mob family, as he taught himself how to drive in less than 2 days in order to work for this mobster by the name of Pinchy, who ended up getting killed by Carmine, but Carmine actually kept Oz around and the rest is history. Now within this same scene, we see Oz invites over some girls, including Eve. Now, the important lesson that Oz gave Vic within this story, and that is things get done no matter what, which is something that comes back a little bit later on. Now, Oz has gathered over some of the Falcone goons to throw a party for making it out of the attacks alive, but also to mourn those who were killed. Now, I want you all to notice the smart move that Oz does in throwing this party, because to me, this is him showing his loyalty to these men, but also getting them on his side and to build morale, and that when push comes to shove and when he goes to push for power, these same men will remember little things like this, and they will feel like Oz is one of them and he didn't just get the power handed to him from the family. I love the comic book references in this interaction between the cam girl named Roxy, who was introduced to Vic, as they're talking about Crown Point, as she says,
I'm from Crown Point.
Yeah, my cousin lived over there. She said it's like a no man's land now or something.
Now, to me, this is a play on the comic book character Roxy Rocket, who was created in 1994 for the Batman Adventures Annual 1. Now, in the comics, Roxy was actually a character who stole jewels for Penguin. So we'll see if she'll ever return to play that role later on in this universe. But another little comic book reference I want to bring up is when Roxy is talking to Victor and she mentions that Crown Point is a no man's land. Now, for my comic book readers out there, Batman No Man's Land was a storyline that ran in the late 90s and basically followed and covered the aftermath of all the earthquakes that hit Gotham, similar to the floods in the Batman film. Now back with Oz, who's overlooking the photos he took from Carmine's safe, that was the photos of Johnny that we'll talk about later, as Eve walks in and wants to talk to Oz about why he needed an alibi, and she knows exactly what he did. Now within this conversation, it's clear as day that Eve is very aware of what Oz does on his day-to-day routine, as Oz tries to calm her nerves by telling her that he's handling everything and how he's gonna have Johnny be the fall guy. Oz just wants her to trust him, and once he's got control, he tells her that he'll be opening up another club for her and her girls to be a part of as entertainment. Like I mentioned in my breakdown last week, I believe this relationship between Oz and Eve will be very important. Now I'm just curious of who's going to turn on each other first. Will Eve turn on him, or will he turn on Eve? Either way, it seems like they're in love, but again, I wonder how much love they're going to have when things really hit the fan. Now back with Sofia, who's in the car, where we learn that the crime has risen over 42% in Gotham since the flooding hit. Again, this is the show giving us more understanding and reasoning to believe that Batman's got his hands full during Oz's rise to becoming the kingpin of Gotham.
It's a big city. I can't be everywhere.
Now the people on the radio talk about the releasing of inmates from Arkham as they directly mention Sofia, aka the Hangman. For those that aren't aware, in the comics, Sofia Falcone was first introduced in the amazing story of The Long Halloween. Now in that story, Sofia is one of the few who survived the mass murder spree that killed many of her family members, one that was committed by her own brother, who later became known as the Holiday Killer. Now in the comics, Sofia, aka the Hangman, would target several police officers of the GCPD instead of the women like they're doing in the show, which I have a theory that I want to share with you all. What if Sofia's taken the fall and taken on this Hangman mantra because she's covering for her brother or maybe even her father? You'll remember that in the Batman, Carmine Falcone killed someone by strangling them and also tried to kill Catwoman by strangling her but didn't get away with it, which again makes me think, what if Sofia is not actually the Hangman but she's covering for her brother or her father? We get another Riddler reference at the bar where a detective is looking to get some drops, but due to the floods, the drop business is suffering from a drought. Sofia overhears this conversation with the detective who's looking to score some drops as we find out that he used to work for her father. Now this detective is labeled as someone who's dependable and good at finding snakes before he became an addict. Sofia gives him some drops and money, and in exchange, he'll look into this recent hit on the products to find this rat. Next morning, we see Sofia is awoken by this nightmare that looked to be her choking, which may be her ties to being called the Hangman. You'll notice that she's sleeping on the floor in her closet and not in her own bed, most likely her having a hard time reacclimating herself to normal day life. Sofia notices she scratched up her neck while she was asleep, leaving marks on her neck. Again, I believe that we're going to get the full backstory on if she is indeed the real Hangman. Now, Oz gets a call from his landlord Caesar, who tells him that his mother was wandering off in the streets, confirming that she's suffering from dementia. We see that Oz's Spanish is pretty damn good, and we remember this from the Batman with the whole scene of
URL right there says that?
Why? You got something to tell us?
Yeah! It's like the worst Spanish I ever heard.
What?
It's la right there.
As the landlord suggests that his mother needs permanent care, we see that Oz pays him to keep his suggestions to himself as he walks out and looks at Vic and tells him to be careful around Oz. We get this really nice sentimental dance between son and mother as she tells him,
I'm working on it. If my son isn't nothing, what am I?
As he promises her he won't let her down. Now it's important to remember in this scene that Oz put on some jazz while dancing with his mom. Now at the funeral where Oz shows up at the very last minute, we see that people are outside with signs saying to send Sofia back to Arkham as Oz fails to get Luca the dirt on Johnny as planned, but as they say, as one door closes, the other one opens, as we see that he sees Sofia inside by herself. She has a smoke. We see Oz shares what I speculated about in my last breakdown about what happened to his brothers not being alive, as Oz tells her that her brothers didn't get a proper funeral because his mother didn't want to have any pity on herself. As we get the call back to where his love from jazz stems from after his mother took him to a live band after weeks of being bedridden after losing her sons, Jack and Benny. I hope you guys really noticed the game of chess that Oz is playing in this very scene. You'll notice that Sofia took interest in the story and asked a few questions about what led to his mom taking him out to the club, and you'll see that Oz responds by saying that she never got to tell him why she did that before she passed. Now we as an audience clearly know that his mother's still alive, but he wants Sofia to know that she's dead because if push comes to shove, someone like Sofia would use his mom against him. I'm pretty confident in saying that I don't believe Oz is going to be able to keep this secret away from her, and hell, maybe even Victor will tell Sofia about his mother. But putting that aside for a second, I want to go back to his brothers not being alive. Was Oz there? Did Oz have anything to do with his brother's death? What about his mom? Did his mom have anything to do with it? Or we don't know much about his father. Did his father die in the same way that his brothers did? Again, I think whatever happened will be very important to Oz's backstory. As we watch, Oz continues to let her know what he said before in this episode that he meant. Now Sofia gets a call from the detective detective about the rat. Meanwhile, Oz gets a text about someone wanting to meet with him. Now, before moving on, I think it's important to point out that I believe this story that Oz shared with her was a defining moment between Sofia and Oz. I believe that Sofia saw that she believes they have a lot more in common than she initially thought. She's under the impression that they both have lost their parents, but they also have lost siblings. This may be the moment that she actually wants to trust Oz. Now, the detective shows Sofia that Maroney's point man wasn't killed and he's under medication after getting shot, as the detective serves him up on a platter for Sofia to question him. Now, back with Oz at his meeting, we see that Nadia isn't happy about her man being pulled from the hospital and also how the robbery went, as she's about to have her men kill Oz. By the way, you notice they were going to stab him in the chest, something that Oz actually does later in this episode, but he stops them by telling him that he has something valuable in his possession. Now, we learn that the woman in the pictures with Johnny is actually Luca's wife, and they've been having an affair for years. Nadia takes this information, and it's safe to assume she's going to use this against the Falcones later on, but at the meantime, she wants Oz to get their point man out of the possession of the Falcones. Now, to me, it's crazy to know that Carmine Falcone actually knew that his brother's wife was cheating on him with Johnny, and he didn't say anything about that. To me, that just shows how messed up this family is. After the funeral, we see and hear all the people whispering about Sofia, who takes the opportunity to show her manners by eating the food with her hands and scoffing it down like she did in last week's episode. Oz and Vic arrive as Oz gives Vic a pep talk and sets the plan in motion to set up Johnny, but also getting Maroney Man out alive. As we watch this game of hide and go seek, as Sofia is keeping tabs on the point man to see if he's alive, as Oz finds Minos and Johnny and smartly makes them aware of the hostage situation in the basement that Sofia is holding up. Speaking of, we see Sofia sees this video of her and her brother when they were kids, kind of bringing back memories, as we get this brief awkward exchange with Sofia and her cousin, who's actually scared to have her around her little daughter, as Sofia tells the mother,
She's a real cutie, Carla. Yeah. Make sure you keep her protected. A young woman in this family might not end well for her.
I'll be honest with you all, I thought this scene was a little bit cheesy, and that's the scene where we see Vic outside when he almost gets caught but he escapes. But then I'm pretty sure that they saw his face, so I'm wondering if they're going to ever notice that that was the same kid and they're going to put two and two together at a later point in the season. Again, this was a quick scene, but it just felt so unserious, from the man randomly running outside chasing Vic to him running like the actual Flash or Michael Cera from Superbad. Now, Oz's plan to distract Sofia's main bodyguard away from the point man works, as Oz finds him and tells him to tell Sofia that Johnny is the rat. But unfortunately, Oz gets the call from Vic that Johnny's diamond situation isn't going to work out, which causes him to change plans, leaving Oz to killing him violently, stabbing him in the chest the same way the Maronis were going to kill him. Now, Sofia and Luca find the body and gather up all their men, including Oz and Johnny, as they're looking for someone that's holding a knife. Now, as I was thinking, this is a perfect opportunity to plant the knife on him, but instead, we see Oz plants the knife on Sofia's bodyguard, who breaks up the fight. I want y'all to remember that Oz probably held a grudge against him from wiring his arm last week. Well, it looks like Oz got his revenge. Now, Sofia's bodyguard ends up getting shot, but Sofia wanted to kill him because she's under the belief that he was the rat, but Luca kills him instead because he made the call. Now, Luca wants Sofia to leave Gotham and go to Italy and claims it for her own safety, as if she's not capable of taking care of herself. Now, you'll notice that Sofia's lost everyone close to her, including her bodyguard, who's now dead, which in return, with Luca doing this, he's pushing her further away from the family and closer to Oz and listening to his advice from earlier. Now, speaking of trust and taking advice, we see Oz and Vic are burying the body as Oz kicks Vic in the grave and tells him to lie in the dirt next to the dead bodies. Again, Oz gives him the lesson to do whatever it takes to get the job done by any means necessary. To me, this is definitely a big moment for the Vic character. Like, I believe this will definitely stick with him, but the question is, will this moment be a lesson learned by Vic? Will he never mess up again? Or will this be a breaking point? Will we see Vic maybe want to go back to his family? I guess time will tell. As we end this episode with Sofia calling a meeting with Oz, and we see that Oz planted the jewels that he wanted to put on Johnny, but he planted it on the security guard, the same diamonds that Oz took from Carmine's safe. We actually learned that these diamonds were pretty important because these were the diamonds that actually brought Al to the Iceberg Lounge the night of his death. He was going to use these diamonds as an investment for the new drug, but ultimately it was going to be for him and his sister to run the family business together, as she looks at Oz and tells him,
Roberta was taken from me, and I refuse to let these old fit men push me aside again like I'm nothing, so I'm going to take from them now. And I'm going to force them to their knees. Should be fun. What do you say, Oz? You in?
Let's dance.
What a brilliant follow-up episode of showing us characters like Sofia and Oz having a lot in common and finding the right dance partner in survival. Now, of course, we know Oz is using her, but there's still a lot that he can learn from Sofia, who in reality, she's the only one that can see through his BS. And deep down, I still think that Sofia believes that Oz has something to do with her brother's death, but like Oz, she's gonna be using him, but they'll dance together to take down Luca and whoever gets in their way. So it's the classic keep your enemies close analogy. Cat and mouse games that Oz played in this week's episode was incredible to watch, and I know the show gets its comparisons to The Sopranos, but this week's episode felt like I was watching Breaking Bad and watching Walter White trying to survive against Gus. Now, the questions I had after watching this episode: what moves will Sofia and Oz take to get Luca out as the Don? Will Nadia use those photos with Luca's wife and Johnny sooner rather than later? Is there a possibility that Dr. Rush is indeed Scarecrow? Is Sofia the real Hangman? Now, before we wrap up this breakdown, I really appreciate you all making it to this point in the video. If you are still here, do me a favor and put in the comments right now, #Let'sDance. Now, I'll be back to break down episode 3, and I would love for you all to hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown, but also hit the share button. If you know anyone that loves talking about the show, definitely share this video with them, but also share your thoughts about this episode, your pros, your cons, your favorite moments, your least favorite moments, and also share your theories after watching this episode. And also, if you had fun, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. You all are amazing, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.